Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Regional Early Learning Resource Center. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa from the Early Learning Resource Center is the host of the program and is with us throughout the series. And John, we better do a good program today because the boss is on the program.
That's right, Joe. Morning, Joe.
That's right, John.
Yes. We are so pleased this morning to welcome Dr. Joyce Miller, who is the founder and CEO of the Northwest Institute of Research, which is the sponsor of the program. And, I wanted to have Dr. Miller on the program for quite a while, but, she's a very, very busy person. So we finally were able to get her. So welcome to the program, Joyce.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here, and I have followed these programs over the years that you've been doing them, and it definitely has been a great addition to what our Early Learning Resource Center can offer to the statewide community.
Well, thank you so much, and we're very pleased to have you. So for our listeners who may not be as familiar with the Northwest Institute of Research, you are the founder of the organization. Tell us a little bit about how it all started and how it kind of has evolved to what it is now.
Well, there actually is an extensive history that goes back to the late 1980s. And that was the point in time when the state of Pennsylvania was just beginning to provide various kinds of professional development opportunities for child care providers. And at that point in time, I'm going to call it my sister organization, which is Keystone Research Corporation, had a contract with the Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare to provide training and professional development for home-based providers. And this was in the late 80s, like 1988.
Mm-hmm.
Soon after that, I partnered with Penn State's Better Kid Care program, and together, both of our organizations provided that training and professional development across the state for home-based providers. And that was at that time under the contract with Keystone Research Corporation. Eventually, the state kept evolving the kinds of professional development and programming they were offering child care providers, both home-based, center-based, school-age care. And at one point in time, which I believe is in the early 90s, mid-90s, Keystone provided the training and professional development across the entire state for all of those child care providers, again, home-based, center-based, school-age, and partnered for the most part with Penn State's Better Kid Care program, but we actually had training organizations and independent trainers that were located throughout the state, so most of that training could be offered in the local communities.
Right.
For these child care providers. Eventually, the state decided that they were going to move into the quality improvement system known as Keystone Stars, and that was in around 2001, 2002. A lot of the planning was happening for that. And again, at that point in time, Keystone Research Corporation was instrumental in helping to develop a lot of what is currently in place in that quality rating improvement system, particularly as it relates to the environment rating scale, which is used as a standardized tool to assess these child care providers to make a determination as whether or not they can move up to the various star levels.
Right.
And then we also were instrumental in developing the STARS Technical Assistance System, which is that system that provides a lot of the framework for the quality coaches that exist today and work with those providers on a one-on-one basis to, again, implement the type of programming that they need to implement and to get the coaching they need so that they can provide that quality care.
Right.
And then it was in 2005 when the state reconfigured how they were going to deliver professional development and quality improvements for child care providers, and they created the regional keys.
Yeah,
At that point in time, in 2005, the contract for the Northwest Regional Key, which covered 19 counties in northwest Pennsylvania, was actually acquired by the Northwest Institute of Research, which is my nonprofit corporation that also now currently holds the Early Learning Resource Center contract for Region 1. So it was in 2005 that the services really transferred from Keystone Research over to the Northwest Institute of Research.
Right.
And again, at that point in time, we were the regional key. Then a few years ago is when the state again reconfigured the delivery system and what it was going to look like, and came up with the new concept of the Early Learning Resource Centers, which in essence eliminated those regional keys, but they created these Early Learning Resource Centers that were going to provide not only the quality rating improvement system function, but as well the child care subsidy system.
Right.
And at this point, I believe there are 19 Early Learning Resource Centers across the state.
I think you're right.
The Northwest Institute of Research is the ELRC for Region 1, so we serve 4 counties. But we are also the quality provider for Region 2, and that covers 9 counties in the what I'd call the northern tier in Pennsylvania.
Right, which includes the county here in DuBois-Clearfield County,
yes.
where we actually record the show.
And then what happened with the professional development delivery system is that was not incorporated into the Early Learning Resource Centers. And for Region 1, or in fact all of what had previously been the 19 counties that the Northwest Institute of Research served as a regional key, then that contract for delivering professional development was moved back under Keystone Research Corporation, which again in past years had served as the professional development provider under the system known as Pennsylvania Pathways throughout the whole state. But now, since July of 2018, we are serving as the professional development delivery system for the 19 counties in western Pennsylvania.
Right.
So I have a long, convoluted history of working with the state since the late 80s in some fashion or another.
Yeah.
With respect to improving the quality of care for our young children,
which is
throughout
really,
the state.
Yeah,
and whether it was a contract I had under Keystone Research or the contract I hold under the Northwest Institute of Research, we've been involved in this business for many, many years.
One of the things that I've wondered about over the 5 years or so that I've been helping John with the show is how the results of quality early childhood education can be measured in terms of what we say in the beginning of the program, improving the outcomes for these children as they enter school. How are these results being quantified and shown to be working, quite honestly?
Well, in a couple ways, you have the state who has contracted with outside evaluators to really assess the impact of not just the professional development system, but the quality rating improvement system, where these providers are getting additional coaching and so forth to move up the STAR levels. And they've been conducting research since the implementation of the Keystone STARS quality rating improvement system. And so that quantification has occurred at the state level through the research that's being done by that independent evaluator. At the national level, though, because again, quality rating improvement systems are basically supported in every state in the nation through the funding that comes from the federal government, the Child Care Development Fund. And there has been extensive research for many, many years, and again, across the whole United States, which has documented the impact of quality improvements in these child care facilities and how it improves the outcomes for young children. And I have to say, I am a sociologist in terms of my training, although I've always said because of all my work over the years in early childhood education, I should get an honorary degree in it. Yeah. But I've long been convinced, again, as a sociologist, that if we want to help improve outcomes for young children, particularly young children who are at risk, they don't come from, or they come primarily from lower socioeconomic families who may not have access to the same kinds of learning resources that other children have. And if we want to give them a head start, they need, it's extremely important that they have access to high-quality early care and education. And that prepares them to enter school at the kindergarten level, to be prepared, to be successful, because if they don't have that preparation, by the time they get into kindergarten, they're already way behind.
Yes, we've talked about that.
And they continue to fall behind.
Yes. One of the things that I wanted to follow up with you, Joyce, is that, obviously as a sociologist, and I know for those our listeners who are not aware, you were a professor at Gannon before, and yes. Sociology really is your passion. And I think it's an interesting background and take that you present to this field, because for folks obviously knowing what sociology is all about and studying that, it's an assessment. We'll talk about how you utilize that research and your background, and I know you've actually studied and you've gone to other countries and studied the cultures there. And what's your take? Can you share a little bit about what you bring from your background as a sociologist to the importance of families in this whole concept of preparing their children to be successes?
Oh, yes, I'd love to talk about that. Sociology is my professional identity.
Right.
And I guess because of that, I'm always interested in looking at what other countries do, cross-cultural kinds of studies. And, of course, if we compare the United States to other westernized countries in Europe and so forth, United States, how shall I say this, has a dismal record of supporting families and of supporting the education of young children. And I think as any civilized nation, we need to recognize that if we don't prepare our young children to be successful in school, you will not have an educated citizenry, people who can go to work, earn enough wages to support them and their families, to become good citizens, to vote, to do whatever they need to do, again, to be high-functioning individuals in a society.
Right.
And we do, as the United States, I've always said this, we do not support families. When it comes to child care, many families today are dual-wage earner families. They need someone to take care of their children. Now, whether it's another family member or whether it's outside care through child care facilities, that has to be in place. And I've always argued that there should be 3 entities involved in helping support that system. Parents, to some extent, have to, put their share in.
Right.
Government has put their share in, and to a great extent, government does that, at least for very low-income families, because they provide child care subsidies for working parents. But I've also argued that business should also be putting their fair share in, and they have not done so to any great extent. And it's important for businesses to do this because they are enabling parents to have care for their children so they can come to work and make sure they're at work on time. And if they have the availability of care on odd hours when a lot of parents might be working now, or if their child is sick, if they have care available for them, they're going to be better in the workforce. Therefore, businesses need to recognize how important this is, and they need to start thinking about how they can support a high-quality early care and education system.
Right now, what is preventing Pennsylvania, especially our part of the state, rural areas, from achieving, if it ever could be achieved, but let's strive for it, universal enrollment of youngsters in quality pre-K programs? What is standing in the way of achieving that, and again, with the emphasis on rural communities?
Well, I think it's not just rural communities that don't recognize that. I mean, there are a few communities that have recognized the importance of that, and like I'll name Philadelphia. They passed the sugar tax. Right. That money that comes in from that tax goes to providing universal early care and education for particularly their low-income families. I think what's preventing it is like it's all about the money. And again, I don't think you have enough citizenry behind supporting the kinds of legislation and the businesses who, again, are being strong advocates of a system that would benefit them to a great extent. So they feel like, well, it's going to cost money. We can't do it.
Right.
It's always, well, we can't afford it. Well, I would always say, if somebody wants to do something, they find the money to do it.
Right.
I mean, look at this right now. Trump is trying to find money to build a wall.
Right, exactly.
Government is notorious for that. If they want to do something, whether it's to go to war, to do X, Y, and Z program, then they find the money. So if there's a will, they will find the way. The problem is there's not the will.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, Joyce, something that seems to be, I don't know if it's going to catch on, but I was just reading that the state of Louisiana, and they aren't the only state, there's other states as well, that are actually have legislation sponsored to use a portion of revenue taken from gambling that's approved in those states to go to early childhood education. I'm not sure whether that's something that's been floated in Pennsylvania or not, but as we expand gambling in the state of Pennsylvania, particularly with now sports betting being approved,
right,
it's probably something that should be considered.
Right. I mean, I know in the past in Pennsylvania, and I can't remember whether it was from gambling or some other source, but funding that came into the state coffers was allocated toward providing services to the elderly.
Right.
That's a lottery. The lottery. Yeah.
Yes, it's a lottery.
Yeah.
Right.
That funding was, and again, but that requires legislation being passed to do that.
Mm-hmm. There are some
and so
states.
You need individuals who are willing to push for that, get the legislation passed. Because, like I said, if there's a will to do something, you can find the way to do it.
Right. Exactly right. We're going to have someone that you're very familiar with on an upcoming show, Christina Marsh, who's Senior Vice President at Erie Insurance. She was recently appointed by Governor Wolf to Pennsylvania's Early Learning Investment Commission. She is obviously very skilled in community and economic development. So we're going to have her discuss how businesses can leverage funding in a public-private partnership to expand early childhood programming. So, the purpose of the Early Learning Investment Commission is a good one, and that's an entity that can probably have influence on what takes place in terms of funding and could help the financial aspect because of the sharing of both government funding and in the private sector.
Yes, I think you'll have an excellent conversation with Christine.
Yeah,
she was actually visited our Early Learning Resource Center about a month ago, and I had a very interesting conversation with her, along with Lori Root, who is the vice president at our United Way, and she sits on my board of the Northwest Institute of Research. So the three of us were discussing, how is it that those business people who are on the Early Learning Resource or Early Learning Investment Commission can provide, or what can they do? In other words, other than it's nice to have you there and you can learn about the importance of early learning, and maybe you can be an advocate, but what is it more concrete that you can do? And we were throwing out a lot of ideas there, and for those of you that might not be aware, the Erie Insurance, which, its headquarters is here in Erie, they are very civic-minded as a business, and they provide a lot of support for economic development, and they want to see, our city change and poverty be reduced, and so they are instrumental. And I think if we can get them to hop on, this bandwagon for early care and education, they'll be a great partner.
Absolutely.
And I would hope that there's other business people throughout the state that are on that commission would also think about what they could be doing in their own communities to provide that kind of support and leverage the funding not only from business but then also from the government sector.
We're talking with Dr. Joyce Miller, the founder and CEO of Northwest Institute of Research, the sponsor of our program. Joyce, tell me a little bit about the so-called one-stop shop now that the Northwest Institute of Research is in serving as the Early Learning Resource Center, because now the organization has taken on, the Child Care Work Subsidy Program. And we only have 2 minutes. So if you can quickly describe how now we are serving not only providers, but also consumers as well.
Okay, in a nutshell, yes, we've become the one-stop shop. So not only do we have, our main facility here in Erie County, but in the other 3 counties that we serve, we have contracted organizations that also serve as a place in which the families and or providers in those counties can go to receive not only families wanting to find out about what's available to them with respect to child care, but then if they have other family needs, then they can be referred out to other community services because we have the staff here that can make those referrals for them. And then you have the child care providers who will use this as a hub for getting their training and professional development, although we do that under the professional development contract. But they also can be working with their case managers, quality coaches that help them improve the quality of their care and to move up the STAR level. So again, with one location, it provides services not only to the families but to the child care provider community as well.
And for our listeners who want more information on the Early Learning Resource Center through the Northwest Institute of Research, they could go to www.nwirelrc.org. That's nwirelrc.org. Well, our time has run out, Joyce. We appreciate you being on the program. I've been wanting to have you for such a long period of time, and I know what 25 minutes goes awfully fast.
Yes, it does.
Yes, we will definitely have you back.
And again, I want to thank you for having me on the program. I've always said that early learning is a passion of mine, and so over the years, I have to say that doing work in this area has just been a real pleasure for me.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at the same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. For John Posa and the Early Learning Resource Center, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.